Here we're going to find out exactly what is VBA. Well, my name is Guy Vaccaro, and let's have a little look at what VBA is, stands for, and how we can use it so that we can then proceed to actually creating our own. Well, VBA is a set of initials that effectively stand for Visual Basic for Applications. Visual Basic is a programming language built by Microsoft for use in Microsoft applications, hence its name, Visual Basic for Applications, loosely based on very old programming language of BASIC. If anyone ever tried to learn BASIC 25 years ago, then you'll have the raw nuts and bolts to be able to build on from there. However, things have moved on. When you create a section of Visual Basic, it's classed as a macro in Excel or a mini program. You could even call it a proper program because it does something, so it's a program. But we tend to use the word program to mean full programs like Excel, Word, PowerPoint. And in this case, we're dealing with a small program, so a mini program or a macro. It's used to create automated tasks, therefore tasks that you don't have to carry out. That's why they're automated. They're not done by a human. So Visual Basic for Application has, obviously, like anything else, some advantages and some disadvantages. The advantages far outweigh those disadvantages, and the main advantages are that it's consistent. Every time you run your little mini program, your macro, it's the same. Whereas if you ask a human to do the same action over and over again, they will differ slightly, they will make mistakes. They may do things a different way for a change. But asking VBA to do the same thing again and again, it's consistent, it's exactly the same. It's faster than a human, so although there is time up front to create the macro, to create the mini program, when you actually run the program, it's a lot faster than the human doing that action. The mini program will also run without errors, assuming it's been programmed correctly in the first place. So there is that little caveat. Others can use the VBA program, the macro, without any need to know anything about VBA. They just need to say, at this point, run that bit of code that someone's written for me, please. You can do things with VBA in Excel that you cannot do through the Excel interface. So you can carry out tasks that you cannot carry out by simply knowing Excel very well. And the biggest disadvantage is that you're not needed. When it's running, and it's running well, you don't need any human interaction at all. You can ask the VBA to go ahead and run that mini program, and you can come back when it's finished. The biggest disadvantage is that in order to create the macros and the mini programs in the first place, you need to know VBA. You need to know Visual Basic for Applications. So you need to know how to program that macro. You also need Excel. So although you can create some very clever things, for anybody else to use those clever things, they need Excel. You cannot take your VBA for Applications and turn it into an executable file that effectively will run on any machine without the need for Excel. Excel has to be there for it to work. If your program doesn't work quite right or hasn't quite been allowed for all situations, it could crash, and then there will become major error messages at the receiver's end. So that's a disadvantage. There is an issue with version compatibility. If you create your VBA macro in one version of Excel, will it work on newer versions when newer versions of Excel come out? Obviously, we don't know until it's tested and tried. Now, the Visual Basic itself, once we get to writing and building, stores its code in what are called modules. And effectively, that's just a big sheet of paper where the code is written down on. But the name for that big sheet of paper is a module. That module is created and stored in your Visual Basic editor. Within the modules, we create procedures. Now, a procedure is a set of code, a macro, a mini program that does something. Can manipulate things, can do simple actions. A function is another VBA command that returns a value. So you can ask functions to add things up or change the case of things. Now, you will use functions already if you're using Excel. There are thousands of built-in functions in Excel. This effectively allows you to create functions that you can use in your VBA. Now, the Visual Basic manipulates objects. Everything in Excel is broken down into objects and sub-objects and collections of objects and properties of objects. So you can see it's fairly logical. Your workbook is broken down into worksheets. Each worksheet is broken down into ranges. A range is broken down to cells. Those cells are then broken down into properties. So you can see the cells have color, they have a font, and then a value. And within your programming, you can manipulate these values or you can interrogate these values. And that's how you then make changes to your Excel file, by manipulating the objects. So there's a learning curve of figuring out what the objects are and what objects are classed as a collection and what the properties are of an object that you can then manipulate. As well as having properties, a lot of objects will have methods. So these are things that you can do to the object. So you can delete it, you can remove it, you can set the focus on it. Lots of different methods. Well, hopefully I've been able to give you a little bit of a flavor of VBA, but you're not really going to be able to taste it in full until you're in and actually doing. So this is the introduction, and now welcome to the world of Visual Basic for applications in Excel 2010.